Bum 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 bum. The Peter Like Show. Bum 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 bum. All right, kind of a serious time in my life. I want you guys to seriously pray for me. I got a major crossroads in my life, and I'm in East Taiwan right now, and I'm trying to take in some scenery, take in this trip because this may be the last trip before I enter this major crossroads in my life. I hate to mention the specifics here because I don't want to jinx the situation, but please pray for me by singing along, gesturing, and leaving a like on this video. Now, aside from that big crossroads, there are a few other things I want you guys to pray for. 2 weeks from now, I'll obviously be going home to the United States, and I'm going to be teaching a calculus class at Paradise Valley Community College. When I get home, there are a few things I want to negotiate with my work. And by negotiate, I don't mean sitting down across from my boss and asking for stuff. Some of it is I need to set boundaries around myself, right? Not necessarily. And the reason that I mentioned this is that I noticed that ever since I left for my vacation, I've been eating a whole lot better. I've been sleeping a whole lot better. My workplace really, and just really pigeonholes all of that. It's hard for me to explain, right? I'm gonna have to figure out. Even I don't understand why my workplace makes it hard for me to eat right? And so, a little bit of soul searching and some boundary setting are probably uh, in order. And so, pray that I do that right. Pray for my art career, obviously. I hope that the tariffs will end soon and metal prices can come back to earth. I really loved working with metal casting. Um, Pray for that. I got some Lego builds to submit in the near future as well. Two big ones, actually. I'll leave it as a surprise. I'll be uploading two new builds soon. I have this obsession slash uncanny ability. Every time I look at a building, I can instantly see how Legos will go together to make that building. My first day when I arrived in Taiwan, my uncle was so upset because when we walked up to his apartment building, my first thought was how his building might be put together with Legos. And he was like, "You came all the way to Taiwan just to play with Legos and to comment about my apartment and Legos and I don't even have to think about it anymore. I look at something just before I left for Taiwan. One of my colleagues had opened. He was working on fixing a mainframe computer, and when he opened it, my first thought was all of these chips. How would I model them out of Legos and all that? I got to build a computer out of Legos someday, and it just comes. It's like a Tetris effect, but with Legos instead. But pray that one of my builds hits it big, right? I think Lego Ideas, they choose 5 builds every year, and my my goal is to submit one build at least once a week, and just play the numbers, right? Sooner or later, one of those ideas is probably going to hit, or it might be the inspiration for the next big art piece, right? Now, what would I do if I made $1 million a year on Lego Ideas? I'd still go to my day job, believe it or not, but I would go there in style. I'd probably live closer to the campus. I would have a lot of my needs taken care of, right? So I wouldn't have to worry about going out when it's 110 degrees outside. And here's why. I don't dislike my job. I dislike all that goes into my job, but I can't think of a time that I disliked a student, course material, and all the other fun stuff that goes into the core elements of my job, right? The things that I might dislike are like my commute, the facilities there. You know, a lot of times I was upset that one of our campuses didn't have a microwave. You know, it makes it hard for me to keep my good lifestyle, right? I dislike that I don't get to sleep right because of the scheduling, but I love all the students. To give you an idea of how much I love all my students, when I think about my students, none of the memories are bad, right? I was working at a tutoring center, and I had a student who sometimes didn't manage his ADHD very well. And I can't, you know, I am autistic myself, so I have to be careful not to be egged on by students like that. And so every time he acted up, I would threaten to take away his reward points. Now, I don't want to punish him. I just want to remind myself that being dragged down to his level is not acceptable, right? I was threatening to take away my own reward points, not his, right? Because I needed to remind myself not to get egged on by this kind of behavior. He didn't know that, though. In his mind, I was threatening to take away his reward points, obviously. And so we had a lot of fun exchanges like that. I would count down from 10. Get back to your work. I'll give you 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8. I would count down. But the countdowns became really distracting to the other students too. So eventually, instead of actually counting down, I would grab his worksheet and I would draw a space shuttle on it. Like launching for the countdown. I would draw space shuttles and say, you're gonna lose your reward points. And so it was all good. Unfortunately, I don't think he understood why I was doing. He certainly didn't. I don't think our boss even understood why. I mean, he thought it was not the best way to deal with him. I wasn't dealing with him. I was coping for myself. My boss didn't know that though. Leave a comment. Maybe I should have played it a little bit differently. But I had a good exchange with the student. I had another student at the tutoring center who actually became the reason why I even got involved in the bismuth art. What had happened was he was studying AP chemistry. He had brought this really fancy periodic table to class. And on the periodic table, it showed how rare each element is in the earth. I was just about to show my student how cheap silver is right now. It's only 10 times more common than gold, but it was 100 times cheaper at the time. I don't know if it still is. I haven't been buying for a while. While looking at the table, I discovered bismuth is even rarer than silver. And so I went home and I ordered 10 pounds of bismuth, and the rest is history. Had it not been for him, I wouldn't have gotten involved in the bismuth, and I probably wouldn't have gotten involved in all the other art as well, because going to art shows is what got me involved in the Mondrian squares, the Legos. I sometimes have students who have funny moments as well. I had one student who, he was 8, 9 years old, a little bit too old for this, but it was kind of funny as well. I told him I had just recently moved from Washington. You know, we're in Arizona, right? Because he was learning about all the states where they are, and he asked me if I was close to Washington, D.C., because he had visited Washington, D.C. at some point. And so it was kind of funny. I had another student. We had just gone back to the tutoring center after COVID-19. He asked me, this was like a year into the pandemic, he asked me if I was old enough to remember how we got rid of COVID-18. He thought the 19 meant that it was the 19th pandemic ever. And so he asked me if I was old enough to remember when we got rid of 18. And so that was kind of funny. There was one time I was mistaken, and my student actually corrected me about that. He had been learning about the space race in the 1960s, and how and who won each event, right? Russians were the first to go to space, but the US was first to go to the moon. And so I asked him, how many women have been on the moon? And he had to look that up, and it was none. And I told him that was kind of a trick question because a woman's device went to the moon, right? When you heard Neil Armstrong say it's one small step, it was powered by a battery discovered by a woman. I thought it was the RTG. I was mistaken. And he went home to read about it, and he told me that's strange. It was just a regular battery, and I was mistaken. But the device did go to the moon quite a few times, especially with the Soviet launches, right, to keep the spacecraft warm. So I had a lot of positive interactions with the students. Unfortunately, when I think about all of the things that I dislike about my job, the commute, the facilities, a lot of times it pigeonholes my trying to eat right. The unpredictability, and that's why sometimes when I was a kid, I used to love to watch game shows, and the host would ask the contestants, "What would you do if you won $1 million?" They would. A lot of people say they would quit their job. No, I would go there in style. That's how I would answer. I'd go to my job in style. What do I mean by that? I'd live a whole lot closer. I'd have a lot of services taken care of so that I don't have to think about that. And so I probably see during this trip in Taiwan, I've made more friends here in Taiwan in 2 weeks than I did back home in 2 years. So what I would probably do is come here to Taiwan more, right? At least twice a year if I hit it big with the Legos, right? And just forget about trying to make connections back home in Phoenix. And actually, if I can forget about making connections back home in Phoenix, I think it also brings about one other benefit. You see, a lot of times, part of the reason people get to walk all over me is that I'm desperate to make new friends, right? If I didn't want to think about making new friends back home, oh my God, I'd be a lot stiffer when it comes to setting boundaries, right? For example, yesterday, I was thinking about how I would handle a few things that might come up at work when I go home, right? Our facilities, I want to negotiate a couple of things, and how I would introduce myself to new coworkers. And now that I have all these connections in Taiwan and I don't want to make new connections back home in Phoenix, it occurred to me that I could use some more stern words with all of these people, right? A lot of times, the wanting to make connections and even wanting to date within the office really put a hindrance to my working relationship. It really does. I can't really explain it here, but I can explain it. When I was working at a different college, this was during the pandemic. I kept getting stepped on all over, coming in at odd hours. My colleague needed to take care of her sister who had COVID, long COVID, and had I not been interested in, to be fair, I kind of did have crazy thoughts for my coworker. I mean, I didn't tell her, I didn't show it, but in my mind, I knew I did. And if I didn't have those crazy thoughts, hey, this doesn't work too well. I actually have plans to go away, right? Which it would flow right out if it did. It would just be like somebody on the street trying to beg me for something. Right? That doesn't go too well. I got plans for my money, right? I can't give you whatever, right? Because I don't have any interest in that person, right? I could actually speak with use my brain instead of using my gut, right? All right, please continue to big crossroads in my life, trying to take one last sightsee before that. This is the Peter Like Show. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Like Show. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Like Show. Bum 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 bum.